The United States Army just retired the most recognizable military vehicle in American history, not because it failed, not because it broke down somewhere in the desert. It was retired because the wars it survived rewrote the rules of warfare so completely that the vehicle itself no longer made sense. The Humvee served for more than 4 decades. It rolled through Panama, the Gulf, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and then roadside bombs started killing the people inside it. So the military poured billions into building something that could take the hit. And then, just as that replacement was finally coming off the assembly line, the Army canceled it too. 2 vehicles. 1 letter, the same day. The question almost nobody is asking is simple. What does the most powerful army on Earth actually plan to drive next? To understand how it came to this, you have to start with what the Humvee really was. The HMMMW-V, the High Mobility Multi-Purpose Wheeled Vehicle, was designed in the late 1970s to replace the aging Jeep. AM General won the initial contract in 1983, $1.2 billion for around 55,000 vehicles. It was built for speed, mobility, and versatility. Not armor, not blast protection. The entire design rested on one assumption, that it would operate behind the front line or in conflicts where the enemy couldn't hit back hard. For a while, that assumption held perfectly. In Panama, in the Gulf War, in Bosnia, the Humvee did exactly what it was built to do. A rugged, dependable workhorse that could go almost anywhere and carry almost anything. Soldiers trusted it. The public recognized it. It became shorthand for American military power itself. Then came Iraq, and everything the Humvee was built around quietly collapsed. When American forces rolled in during 2003, insurgents studied the vehicle and found its weakness fast. The underbelly was flat, the doors were thin, and a single buried artillery shell wired to a trigger could tear through it like cardboard. The improvised explosive device, the IED, became the signature weapon of that war. Cheap, simple, devastating. By the mid-2000s, hundreds of American troops had been killed or maimed inside Humvees that were never engineered to absorb that kind of blast. If you've ever ridden in one of these, or watched them roll across your screen in war footage for the last 40 years, this is the part of the story where it stops being about a truck. The military's first response was emergency armor, bolt-on steel plates welded onto vehicles already in the field. But here's what most people don't realize. Those armor kits made things worse in a different way. The Humvee was never designed to carry that weight. The extra steel overloaded the suspension, burned out transmissions, and left the vehicle slower and harder to control. Crews were better protected and more vulnerable at the same time because now the trucks were breaking down under their own armor. This was never a failure of the Humvee. It was the failure of the threat it was built to face. And the Army knew it had to start over from the ground up. That fix came in 2 phases, and the first one was a giant. Phase 1 was the MRAP, the Mine-Resistant Ambush-Protected Vehicle. These were huge V-shaped hull trucks built for one purpose, to channel a blast outward and away from the crew instead of straight up into the compartment. And they worked. Survival rates inside an MRAP against an improvised explosive device were dramatically higher than anything a Humvee could offer. Soldiers came home who otherwise wouldn't have. The military bought them fast, around 29,000 of them at the peak of the wars. But the MRAP carried its own problem. It was enormous. Depending on the variant, it weighed between 14 and 18 tons. Most helicopters couldn't lift it. It couldn't thread through narrow streets, climb mountain trails, or cross soft ground without sinking. In any fast-moving fight, it was nearly useless. The military had solved one problem and built another, too light, and a bomb kills you. too heavy, and you can't move. What the Army actually needed was a vehicle that could do both at once, survive the blast and still go anywhere. That was the entire idea behind the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. The program officially began in 2006, but it took nearly a decade to reach a real production contract. In August 2015, Oshkosh Defense, a Wisconsin manufacturer, beat out Lockheed Martin and AM General, the original Humvee maker, to win it $6.7 billion for the first 16,901 vehicles. And the reason the Army committed so hard wasn't that Oshkosh had built a better Humvee. It had built a different category of machine entirely. The JLTV sits in a class the military calls light protected. It weighs around 14,000 pounds, far heavier than a Humvee, but less than half an MRAP. And that weight bought something the Humvee never had, and the MRAP gave up for armor, real off-road mobility. It hits 60 miles per hour on pavement. It fords water up to 60 inches deep. Its independent suspension, the same principle used in off-road racing, lets every wheel move on its own, keeping all four tires biting into terrain that would strand an ordinary truck. But the most important feature isn't the engine or the suspension, it's underneath the floor. The JLTV's underbody was engineered around the exact lesson Iraq taught, a combination of V-shaped geometry and energy-absorbing material that redirects a blast from below. And the seats don't bolt to the floor. They hang from the frame, so when an explosion strikes the undercarriage, the floor absorbs the shock instead of driving it straight into a crew member's spine. The military calls it a blast-attenuating seat system. In plain terms, troops hitting a device that would have killed them in a Humvee now have a real chance of walking away. If a story about how a single design choice rewrites who lives and who dies is the kind of thing you want more of, take 1 second to subscribe. Most people watching this haven't, and it genuinely keeps these going. The vehicle also carries scalable armor. Add plates for a high-risk convoy, strip them for a light patrol. One armor level was never going to fit every mission, and the JLTV was built knowing that. The roof can mount a remotely operated weapon station, so a gunner can fire without ever raising his head above the armor line. The Army and Marine Corps planned a combined buy of more than 60,000 of them. This wasn't a side project. It was meant to be the backbone of American ground mobility for an entire generation. And it kept evolving. In February 2023, the Army did something almost no one expected. It took the contract away from Oshkosh and handed the follow-on, worth more than $8 billion, to AM General, the company that built the original Humvee. AM General built a brand new factory in Indiana from the ground up in under 2 years and started producing an upgraded version called the A2. And the A2 was not a minor refresh. It carried more than 250 engineering changes, a new 470 horsepower Duramax diesel, 15% better fuel economy, and most importantly, a single 24-volt lithium-ion battery that replaced the old dual lead acid system. That sounds like a small detail until you understand why it mattered. The older JLTV could only generate around 13 kilowatts of electrical power, and modern units were demanding so much from their radios, jammers, and sensors that some were literally towing generators behind the truck just to keep everything running. The A2 was built to carry the one thing that now defines the modern battlefield, drone defense. Fitted with a counter-drone weapon station, a detection ring, and airburst ammunition, it was designed to spot and kill the cheap quadcopters that have turned every road into a potential ambush. 19 of these, A2 test vehicles, rolled out of that Indiana factory in April 2025, headed for 18 months of trials at Aberdeen and Yuma. And then, on May 1st, 2025, the Army canceled the whole thing. This is where the story turns into something almost nobody predicted, because the JLTV wasn't canceled for failing. There were no cost overruns that doomed it, no performance scandal, no congressional investigation. The vehicle worked, and the Army's own testing confirmed it worked. The cancellation came from the very top. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a memo on April 30th titled Army Transformation and Acquisition Reform. It described ground vehicles like the Humvee as wasteful, outdated, and obsolete. The very next day, Army Secretary Dan Driscoll and Chief of Staff General Randy George signed a letter to the force naming both the Humvee and the JLTV as excess ground vehicles the service would stop buying. 2 vehicles, 1 letter, the same day. The brand new drone killer was effectively canceled the same week its first test models were being delivered. So why kill a vehicle that was doing exactly what it was designed to do? The answer is a fundamental shift in how the United States expects to fight. The military's focus is pivoting hard toward the Indo-Pacific, toward a potential confrontation with China spread across thousands of miles of open ocean, island chains, and coastline. In that kind of war, vast fleets of armored trucks matter far less than long-range missiles, drones, and naval strike power. The Army isn't claiming ground vehicles are useless. Its vice chief put it bluntly. Inside the armor, heavy, and striker formations, they already have enough. The argument is that tens of thousands more, at roughly $300,000 each, is no longer where the money belongs. Instead, the Army plans to shift its lighter units toward the infantry squad vehicle, a stripped-down, faster, far cheaper platform built for speed rather than blast protection. A vehicle that deliberately trades away the one thing 2 decades of war taught them to value most. But the Marine Corps never agreed to any of this, and this is where joint stops meaning joint. The Marines had been fielding JLTVs since 2019 and were planning to buy more. 2 of their most important new weapons, a mobile anti-ship missile launcher and their primary mobile air defense system, are built directly on the JLTV chassis. The Army ended a shared program without consulting them first, and in Congress, that landed hard. Representative Betty McCollum said it plainly. Joint means joint. That's what the J stands for, and joint decisions should be made together. The Marine Corps Commandant told lawmakers his service was never consulted, and warned that pulling the Army, by far the largest buyer, out of the program would drive the per-vehicle cost up for everyone left in it. Fewer trucks, higher prices, a mobility strategy suddenly built on shifting ground. The Marines are now even exploring a second supplier just to keep the line alive. So the program didn't end. It fractured. The Marines are still buying. The Air Force is still buying. Foreign customers from Poland and Lithuania to Israel and Romania are still ordering. What's left is a joint program suddenly without the service that designed and led it. And it leaves roughly 20,000 JLTVs already in American service, with no fully settled plan yet for how they'll be sustained and supplied across the decades ahead. A Humvee that defined 40 years of American combat, set to be replaced by a vehicle that was supposed to last 40 more, sidelined before it ever got the chance to prove what it could do. The deeper story was never really about 2 trucks. It is about a military trying to guess what the next war looks like, and betting tens of billions of dollars on the answer. If the Pentagon is right, the open ocean decides the future, drones rule the sky, and the armored truck becomes a relic of a war that is already over. If it is wrong, those vehicles get canceled right before the moment a soldier needs one most. So here's the real question worth sitting with. When the fighting shifts from the road to the sea, what exactly should a soldier be driving? And is anyone certain enough to bet a life on the answer? If this opened your eyes to something already happening inside the US military, drop a comment with what the Humvee meant to you, and subscribe so the next story finds you.